question is, what is the role of science in environmental policymaking? We're gonna leave the question open to all of you.
Well, I can, go ahead, Gerceida, please.
Oh, okay, I was just going to say, it's designed to improve the quality of complex decision-making and looking at who works with those natural resource managers, interest groups, and also citizens.
Yeah, I was going to add that the role of science is not as strong as it should be, because when we're talking about the environment, unfortunately, the issues have become politicized, and especially in this country. But these are matters that are objective reality in a way. They're the rules that really govern the earth, which are the biological, chemical, and physical rules that have been part of this planet for 4.6 billion years. And humans have only existed for 200,000 years, and our civilization, has only flourished recently. And yet all of our decisions are sort of anthropocentric for the most part. They're based on our own ideas, and they don't take into account the reality of the situation of living on a planet that orbits the sun, the only place in the universe so far as we know that there's life. So these decisions that regard the environment have a huge impacts on people and non-humans alike. And they're primarily, the rules are really scientific rules, but these are often overshadowed by economics and politics, as we've seen. We can see the transition between administrations. There's a very encouraging acknowledgement now that climate is a real issue. We've all been through the pandemic, so we know that we're subject to rules that are not really the ones that we've been focusing on, right? We're all floored by a virus, which came from nature and from our going into nature and taking organisms out of nature. So I think the role of science is fundamental, but it's not sufficiently recognized, and it needs to be more so that we can proceed realistically.
I would just add to that briefly that in thinking about the role of science, so what science adds to the political process is that it brings very specialized knowledge, which might not be common knowledge. It brings a certain amount of objectivity, data, again, which might not be available or well known or understood or interpreted to our policy and decision makers. And so it brings a certain amount of independence, wisdom to the whole process, and hopefully informs the decisions that can and should be made and that benefit the society and the environment.
Okay, I'd like to direct this specific question to Jamie as a follow-up. So as a citizen, how do you view science's role in environmental activism?
Well, I mean, scientists' role in environmental activism is really just about the ground level of what are the facts, because we can't actually create solutions if we don't have the facts to go off of. And so there is a lot more that goes to environmental activism than just science. There's the social justice aspect, there's the aspect of humans and survival. And honestly, what moves people, what sways people, is stories of how people are affected, not the actual scientific like if you show someone a graph of like carbon levels increasing, they're going to be like, okay. But if you show someone like a story of a person who got sick and died of cancer because of the climate crisis, or just other things that have happened to people, because like if you show them personal stories, people are moved by stories. Humans are, we evolved telling stories. I mean, it all started telling stories around a fire. And so the role that science has is that basically it tells us what facts we need to go off of and what we actually have to do. But then we have to bring in the more of the humanities and the arts to be able to properly communicate that science.
So tying off that, today we have a lot of students watching who may be trying to decide what career to pursue. And I know many of you, besides Jamie, are scientists. how did you all decide to become scientists in the environmental field as opposed to like a policymaker, for example? But how did you decide that that's how you wanted to be involved with the environment? Tough question, but if anyone wants to take the lead in that.
Well, I can never stand silent. So, and I always appreciate the students who jump in whenever I ask a question. So I'm thanking all of you students out there who do that. But I will not be the first next time. So I decided by doing an internship. So I was really between being a doctor, medical doctor, between majoring in Russian. I really had a diversity of interests. And I think I've mentioned this before to you, Leah. I decided to take a year off because I didn't know what to do. And I really actually did want to make a difference in the world. That was always a part of it. I wanted to help. And then I realized, like, well, there's a lot of people helping people in terms of medical doctors. Like, there's not really a shortage of medical doctors. And then I applied for some conservation internships in Brazil, where I grew up. And I did not apply specifically for marine turtles, but that was the first one that got back to me. And that really just changed my entire life. They work with communities. They're from the community. They're Brazilians, and they have changed the trajectory for marine turtles from sharp declines to downlisting. And they've involved everyone from, children to the president, from local to national scales to international, such that they were recognized as one of the leading conservation organizations in the world. So I think the internship really made a difference, as well as the idea of kind of weighing, like, where am I most needed? And I probably would have gone in for policy, but I really am an academic, I have to be honest about that. I love to study. I've been in school my entire life, pretty much. So I think, though, for people, like, what I would suggest for students is to just do what you love, because the movement needs everybody. We have a lot of academics, maybe we need stronger communicators, right? We definitely need activists. So I think everyone has a role to play, and, doing internships, taking classes, networking is so important. Talk to everyone that you could get ideas from. So that's what I would have to say.
I sort of agree with Genya in the sense that you should choose a field that you're passionate about. I didn't start out in environmental studies. As a matter of fact, as a child, I was exploring the natural world, and the thing that I felt the closest to were the stars. So I got into astronomy at a very early age. And I thought that I was actually going to be an astronaut at one point, but then in junior high school, I had a teacher that introduced me to oceanography. So I went from being in space to, deep within the ocean, and I majored in physical oceanography in college. And while there, as most students, you flounder around a little bit trying to figure out, which classes you really like and which direction this is going to take you in. And that's sort of what happened to me. I decided at that point that I wanted to major in fluid dynamics. I ended up at the Lamont Doherty Geological Observatory as an oceanographer doing research in the lab, and went on to Standard Oil, worked there in the corporation. So I got a variety of experiences. And then I finally realized, like Genya, I really am an academic, because I've been studying all my life. And that's what sort of led me to teaching. I taught high school physics, and then eventually I came to NYU. So I've had a wide variety of careers, so to speak, you know, in just trying to figure out where I best fit in. So I think with time, you'll be able to do that also.
For me, I think it's interesting because everyone I think on this panel is a scientist except me. When it comes to climate action, I feel like I also don't want people to feel like they have to go. Big respect to the scientific field, big respect. My brain just doesn't work that way though. I'm an art student. I want to be a director and a screenwriter and an actor. So that's so I'm going to Tisch studying film and television, and I feel like a lot of people, I used to think that I had to go into either science or policy to be able to make a difference. Well, not to be able to make a difference, because I've already been an organizer and an activist since I was 14 years old. But I thought that the natural path is like, okay, I'm in politics, so I might as well like study politics, but or study environmental science. But then I was like, I hate those classes. Like I love science documentaries like Cosmos, Nature channels. I love that. But all my science classes, barely passed them, could not stand them. All my political classes, I mean, I was already doing politics. Like I'm, you know, testifying before Congress, organizing marches and protests and strikes. Like I'm already like lobbying politicians. So I was like, why study what I'm already doing? What do I actually really love? And what I love is to make art. And I thought that was somehow selfish, or that I had to box myself into something, like in order to be someone who cares about the environment and the climate crisis. Well, everyone should care, it's survival. But I thought because I was a figure in the environmental movement, that meant I had to do a major that wouldn't make me happy, but was just what I was supposed to do because it had the most to do with the climate. But I think for me, there are other ways to get involved. For me, like my activism, I do separate from what I'm studying. And then what I'm studying is like a breath of fresh air, of a break from constantly thinking about the climate crisis. So like, I obviously might put in themes of climate change and stuff in my films and movies and stuff like that. But my passion is like not in making like climate documentaries or anything like that, but I want to tell different narrative stories. I'm also very passionate about LGBT representation. And so, you know, one of the main reasons I'm in film school is there are other aspects of yourself beyond simply caring about the climate crisis. And for a long time, I boxed myself in as just, and cut out the other parts of myself that had nothing to do with climate change, because there was pressure from the world, from the media, from just everyone around me that's like, Jamie, the climate activist, that's what she does. And I thought that in order to be a real activist, in order to really care about climate change, I just had to be focused on it all the time, 24/7. But what happened is I started to resent the cause. I started to resent it from taking something away from me. And so I decided to actually major in something that had nothing to do with it, so that I could like have the sanity to continue my activism and make art that has nothing to do with climate change. I might make art that does have something to do with it, but I think you don't have to major in policy or environment to care. I'm an art major and I still am very much in the environmental field. So you don't have to box yourself in. That's, I guess, my spiel. Shout out to all the scientists. My brain doesn't science, but I appreciate all of the science and math brains out there. I forgot how to the minute I got to art school, I forgot how to add and subtract. So great job. I cannot do what you do, but I admire your work.
So speaking of using art as a way to communicate science, how can students influence climate policies and find ways to communicate their ideas?
Well, making a bridge to the last question on this issue in terms of how we can advocate. One of the things which was very instrumental coming out of my teens, and I'm not American, I'm from Jamaica, was that I started writing for the newspaper and writing about birds, because I've always loved birds, but actually using the language of development, of criminology. I remember I wrote an article, so owls are persecuted around the world and people will kill them, they fear them. And I wrote an article for the the most dominant Jamaican paper, and I started with the word murdered, that this bird was murdered. And speaking how these issues of people's fears, things that people don't understand had led them to this act of killing the owl. And making that bridge to how we think about these issues of pollution, climate change, disease, and this intersection with poverty and all of these issues. So again, it was very instrumental that I was able to get that voice out there, but it also, as we reflect on how we can be a part of change, how we can be a part of advocacy, the way that I was able to do this was to bring the public's attention, going back to what Jamie was saying, these issues of storytelling, bringing powerful narratives, things that were relatable, that people understood, it was already embedded in culture, and presenting that to the public. You know, today we can do this through various ways, through social media, through blogs, through other ways, but it remains a very important, very powerful way that we can start. And I must also say that as our students on the call think about the future, it was an incredible help to me later on. You know, later on I would go to an interview and somebody like, oh my God, you're Leo Douglas, I've read your work. I saw your paper that you wrote in the newspaper. And, you know, people would while I'm being interviewed, start to talk about the stuff that I'd written, you know, a year before. So again, you know, it can be very powerful in terms of establishing yourself in the field, even before you're a researcher or, you know, somebody who has a job, a real job, so to speak. And it can also be a powerful way to add voice to these causes. And, you know, as I did, we can continue by sharing our writing with our congressmen, with our representatives in public office, you know, putting this information in key places and, you know, help to bring voice, draw attention, to elevate, to center these issues. It can all be very, very powerful.
I wanted to add a little, that's a wonderful point, Leo, and I really enjoyed hearing what Jamie and Gerceida had to say before. I wanted to add a little plug for Fresh Kills Park. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's it was the largest landfill in the world at one point. It's right on Staten Island, and it used to get all of New York City's garbage. And now they're being transformed. It's the largest landfill to park transformation. And part of their work is really integrating art and sustainability. So that's just one initiative. There's some sculptures being put out there. There's also a lot of music that integrates bird song. You know, there's a variety of events. So you could go to freshkills.org or Fresh Kills Park on Google. And that's just one example out of many that really integrate art and science. And that is so important, as we've been saying. You know, science isn't necessarily that engaging. You know, it is the fundamental platform, the base of the pyramid, but, you know, reaching out to other people through art, through writing, you know, all of these things is so important to get more people involved.
I agree with both of you, Leo and Genia. Now that I teach astronomy, you know, I've moved out of the environmental field, but the same techniques can be applied in the sense that I do astronomy in the park, and we do hands-on experiments, let them look through telescopes. We actually have students to do poster boards, and also music is involved because the Jazz Festival is happening on the day that we're presenting all of this science. And I think that's probably a very good way to do it. You know, as you said, integrate science and art. It's rather than STEM, it's called STEAM. I'm sure you guys have heard of that terminology also. But yes, I do agree with you. Art and music are very important. And as a matter of fact, if you think back on your younger years, if you played an instrument probably helped you with your math, because it is exactly that. So, I think that's a good idea, a good way, a good approach.
So I'm not sure how many of you are active on social media, but recently we've seen social media as a big part of the climate movement. In some ways, a great force that is raising awareness, but also in some ways used to discredit environment and environmental science and spread misinformation. So I just wanted to see what you guys think, what your take is on the role of social media and the good things about it and the bad things about it, and what this tension is.
The one problem I see with social media is sometimes concepts are misrepresented. And that's probably the biggest problem. You have to have reliable sources. And when you're on social media, trying to vet, sources can be harder for a young person. And that's where your college professors can come into play to help you. Also, I would think that you would try to get involved with maybe other local organizations or your politicians, but you have to really be careful with what you see on social media. And if you do find a good site, hopefully it explains the science well, because that's the other problem. If you make it too complicated, people can't grasp what you're trying to teach them. So that's one of the things that I see happening in social media.
I don't want to call you out, but Jamie, I feel like you might have more of a positive take on the social media part of it, if you want to speak to that.
I mean, I have both a positive and a negative take on the social media aspect of things. I have more of I have half a positive take and half not a positive take. I think, Zero Hour, the organization that I co-founded, wouldn't have existed without social media. I put out a post on social media saying, I'm going to start a youth climate march, who's with me? And it did not go viral by any means. Like 20 people saw it. But one person, I was in Seattle at the time, one person named Nadia Nazar, who lived in Baltimore, was there, saw the post and liked it and wanted to get involved. And then we started this organization together. And through social media, we were able to recruit a lot of people to come to our real life in-person marches, like the youth climate marches that sparked the school strike for climate movement back in 2018. And we've been able to communicate and organize internationally. So we had 25 marches all around the world back in 2018. I was 16 at the time. And we organized this in part due thanks to social media, because word was able to spread quickly to a lot of people. So I think it's a great tool for organizing. It can also be misused, not just for lack of information, but people are really cruel and awful on social media sometimes. People can definitely get trolled, doxxed, harassed, all of that stuff. I've experienced both the positive and the negative of social media. And so I really think that it's just like anything, it's a tool. And if used right, it can really impact millions of people. And if used wrong, it can hurt millions of people. And so that's why we just need to treat it carefully. Just like, just like, I don't know, when you have construction tools, they can be very deadly if put into the wrong hands. Like if you have like a drill or a hammer, you make sure you keep those away from children because they can cause a lot of damage. But in the right hands, they can help build something great. So that's how I view social media.
I just wanted to add one quick thing. I think all the major points have been made, but the one that I was thinking about also was the echo chambers that happen with social media, where, we just get locked into our view, and then other people are kind of locked into their echo chambers, and the ads are all feeding on your likes. And, there's a little bit of manipulation in there. I don't know if you've seen The Social Dilemma, but I would recommend that. So I think it's always important, like Abraham Lincoln said, to take into account opposing views. And I find, the best arguments are the ones that really know all the opposing views, have contemplated them, and yet still, answered them and say, well, I think I'm right. Or, this is my informed position, right? So I would just say in general, to have an open mind, even about the environment, just in terms of listening, and then, but also being strong enough to say, but I also know, what my, I've informed myself, I've looked at reliable sources, I've looked at a diversity of sources, I've listened to many different voices from around the world, and now this is what I think.
Okay, so I know that we all realize that there are different systems and different communities who are more directly involved in certain environmental issues and certain environmental policies. So how can we incorporate local knowledge systems into environmental policy?
Great question, Ambria. In my former life working for USAID, I thought about this a lot. And actually, it led me to what I ultimately did for my PhD. One of the things which I noticed, Ambria, was that, I would go to these stakeholder meetings, in different parts of the country, and I'd be like, oh my God, it's the same people, I saw last week in that last meeting. These were people who had time, virtue of being just maybe independently wealthy, or some other means that they had time to go around, who already were connected into the system somehow. Maybe they had a previous job. In the Caribbean, often it's the case sometimes, they're expats, they've come back to retire, they've worked in government or institutions before. And what sometimes happens is that what they're doing is actually representing not the interests of a broader set of individuals, but their interests. So local interests, especially when communities that have been historically marginalized, in some countries, these can be very gendered as well, where the women are expected to be at the back of the room and be quiet. Sometimes it's an issue of, lower income individuals, mom and dad both has to work. And that time, me setting up my fancy meeting to talk about climate change is at 3 o'clock on a weekday. Well, not everybody has time to take off work 3 o'clock on a weekday to come and talk for an hour or 2 hours. It's just not going to work. So in terms of being inclusive, in terms of involving local communities, in terms of thinking about indigenous knowledge, all of this has to be thought of very carefully when we're talking about these concerns, especially when the concern, be it a water issue, a climate change issue, a pollution issue, adversely affects those communities whose voices should be represented at the table. There's this adage that says, if it's about me, it should include me. And we should always kind of think this as, I know I have learned to do this. And again, it was something that I had to be taught in terms of thinking well ahead in terms of how to include these voices. And sometimes, Ambria, it means getting away from the meeting. I don't know how many of you have watched this series, Parks and Recreation. Oh my God, I love that series. But oh my God, thank you all for coming here. This is gonna be the best meeting ever. And you look around and it's like, 3 grandmas and grandpa in the room, like, oh my God. But, unfortunately, it reflected so much of a reality. As I said, sometimes getting away from non-Western ways of thinking, sometimes it means going around to community members, finding those women at the time when they're not burdened down with the kids and getting dinner ready, capturing that information if they can't be there, taking that to the meeting, making sure that we're capturing the voices if we have a meeting who might be shy or have been silenced in the past and whose voices need to be captured, and even the voices that we don't agree with. Put them up on the board, validate those voices, definitely, and have them as a part of the conversation. I mean, there's a lot that I could say because I was kind of my job for several years, but yes, so important and, requires very careful planning for this to happen.
And Leo, I just want to piggyback off of you. For a little over a couple of years, I was part of the Sea Level Rise Task Force for the state of New York. And we would have these monthly meetings. And I would notice that at these meetings, as you said, the general public was invited. Of course, all the people on the task force were there that were appointed by the governor, but a lot of the same citizens showed up, to these monthly meetings. But there was one incident in my neighborhood where a local car wash started dumping this cleaning fluid into the sewer system, and it was getting into the groundwater. And because the EPA monitors, this neighborhood pretty well, because the citizens in my neighborhood demand that, they were able to catch it, after a couple of weeks or so. And what happened is the community boycotted the car wash, of course, but then they also came together at the community center and had meetings and discussed it. And it was at a time that was good for everyone, like a Saturday afternoon, after people have finished running around doing all their errands, so on and so forth. So that's one thing that can be very valuable in terms of getting communities organized, is to create a space where they can come and voice their opinion, and also have like invited politicians to come in and listen to, what they have to say. And that's pretty much what we do in the Adelaide Park Civic Association, is bring in, our local politicians and discuss the water quality, the air quality, the noise pollution, try to create a better quality of life for, the community itself. So there are, I guess, ways, we can engage the community in that effort.
Yeah, I wanted to add to that because, many times with environmental issues, as, I think many of us, there's a lot of research that has shown that the communities that are most affected, by things like pollution, climate change, are going to be, vulnerable communities, right? And they often, I feel like the ideal is for communities to have their own voice coming from the community, right? But sometimes somebody from the outside has to come in to build it up. And in that case, what needs to be avoided for sure is something like ecocolonialism, right? So there's, I wanted to bring up the group I work with in Brazil, the Sea Turtle Program, because there was no American that came into Brazil and said, oh, you need to protect your sea turtles. You're doing a bad job. Like, we know how to do it, right? That didn't happen. These were people actually, the age of many of you that are probably watching, college students. They graduated from college. They were Brazilian. They were from the South, they did go to other regions where they hadn't grown up, because they went where there were problems with the sea turtles. And what they did though is they moved in there to these small fishing villages, and they just lived there for 30 years. They're still there. it's still the same people. And of course, they've involved many young people, and there's tons of volunteers and community members. But they never came in with a stick of like, this is what you have to do. We know, right? They actually just asked people like, why are you taking these eggs? Right? And well, it's 150 eggs. Like, it's a lot of food, you know, it's easy. It's right there on the beach. And so what they did is they hired the poachers, because the poachers were from the village. They could recognize a footprint. They knew who it was. And they hired them to be the protectors. So just by doing that, they gave people employment. They got the work done. They valued the local community, you know, and by doing that, you know, they also asked people, what can we do to help your community? And many times they said, we need help with the kids. So they would have, you know, young interns doing programs, educational programs with the community children who wouldn't love to have work with a little sea turtle hatchling and, you know, release it onto a beach and be a mini guide. They had these mini guides, you know, and you know, they also worked with the women, and they put their wonderful artisanal works in their shops that attract, you know, tourists from around the country, around the world. And so all of that was you know, it wasn't like them coming and saying, this is what you should do. It was like, let's all kind of, you know, work on this together and not like throw people in jail and stuff like that. And I just, the last point I wanted to highlight was a book by Dr. Paige West, who I think was Leo's advisor at Columbia, one of them, who writes about dispossession in the environment in Papua New Guinea. And she really makes the point, as she calls them bingos, you know, these international NGOs that come in and they're like, we're going to build your capacity, you know, and they're not really, you know, we have these microloans, but they won't give the loans to the people that actually are able, know how to manage the fisheries. They're managing all this business in their own way, but they don't fulfill the criteria of these loans. So, you know, it's just that point of, you know, the people who are there really know the most. They're the most affected. And, you know, not even just a partnership, but even in a point in Leo Douglas organized Blackness and Biodiversity yesterday. And one of the main points that I believe it was Dr. Kiki said was, if you create something, then leave or hand it over. You know, if it didn't spring up from the community, train people, like Leo said, get it going, and then get out of there so that it's a self-sustaining initiative.
Just to kind of follow up to this question, scientific mediation is a more newer phenomenon in a way for scientists and policymakers to come together to solve different climate issues. So could you all go into a little bit more depth regarding the role of scientific mediation in policymaking?
I'm ready. Do you want to define scientific mediation a little bit so we're all on the same page in terms of?
Scientific mediation actually separates out the underlying scientific question that's embedded in some controversial political issue like energy policy. And it involves everyone, not just those who are part of the decision-making, but other stakeholders, as well as the general public. It also allows for a more informed, socially responsible decision. It clarifies the underlying science, uncovering the biases of humans, you know, who are making these decisions to try to help make clear the extent of any policy that's being recommended. So it's truly based on science, and it has never been attempted in the United States. Abrams, I actually have the book here, The New Universe and the Human Future. Nancy Abrams is the one who came up with this method when she was a lawyer working at the Office of Science and Technology. And it was actually used in Sweden, but it has not been used in the United States. And it was very successful there in terms of dealing with the issues of nuclear energy.
Justin, thank you, Dr. Jones. But just in the interest of time, we have one last and overarching question that I hope you guys can all answer. That is, what is our individual roles in shaping our Earth, and what role can we all play? And so, you all have one last, final words before we go into the Q&A.
Well, I think I'll speak of my role as a researcher. One of the roles, which is an obligation, I might add, is that in many cases, I am accepting money that's it's not my money, it's taxpayers' money. Maybe the university has given it to me, maybe I have acquired it through a grant that I wrote, but it does give me an obligation to not just share my findings with the choir, so to speak. Oh my God, I published it in Nature or in Science, these journals that people actually have to pay to read them, and it's ridiculously expensive, and most people are not going to get it even if they read it anyhow. Is that my role and obligation is to make sure that this knowledge informs the public good. Especially since my research is thus designed to inform, to help protect, to help to educate, to help to build this better future that I'm hoping for and that we all would like. So I think it's an important role for me. So in terms of just providing this information, I'm very much interested in exactly what Leah and Ambria, thank you for inviting us today, asked us to do today, just to provide information about this topic to the public and to others who are going to be even more effective, I would imagine, of doing this. And I am, giving testimony, getting involved, helping people to get elected. I would also argue one of our roles, which is very right now, is thinking about barriers to electing people to office who are going to advance the agendas of protecting the earth, of protecting the health, of in centering the rights and values and needs of marginalized people with respect to better health and a better environment. And to speak up when we see issues of voter suppression and other issues which are going to counter our interests. We just cannot be silent in the face of these issues, because they will have powerful intergenerational impacts on all of the things we care about if we just relax and do nothing.
Well, I can jump in. I always love these questions about what people can do, because in all my class, I kind of have two guiding quotes, and one is by E.O. Wilson, and it refers to that point where I started my first comment, that we are a biological species living on a planet. And that's the reality, and that, it behooves us to understand that. And the second quote is by Jane Goodall, and she basically says, everyone is important and everyone makes a difference. And it really drives me crazy when people say the individuals don't make a difference, that, as opposed to the corporations and the governments. And of course, the corporations and the governments are important, but those are composed of individuals. And I think, even you two, Ambria and Leah, you already made a big difference today. Young people make a difference, and doing what they love. We just had Jamie here who's been making a difference doing these things since she was 14, right? We've all heard of Greta Thunberg. And so many young people around the world. And they're like Jamie mentioned, you don't have to be a scientist by any means. Anything that you love to do, art, communication, law, everything is just so important right now, because these issues are inherently multidisciplinary and they're global. and they're complex. So, I think everyone makes a difference, and it doesn't mean that we all have to be perfect. And I think, yeah, Jamie mentioned like getting all stressed out. All of us have been there, like, oh, do I do enough? You can be like vegan and still be thinking you don't do enough. And that's not really as helpful as just saying, I'm doing my best. It might not be everything, but if all, 7.6 billion plus people in the world, did something, then this would be a very different world.
I agree with you, Eugenia. Everyone across the globe has a role to play in taking care of our planet. And like Leo said, coming from, a scientific standpoint, I'm trying to get at the truth. I don't want to spread falsehoods out there. And then I also think that NGOs, who are the watchdogs, and citizens, they can follow, the recommendations, by the environmentalists and so on and so forth. Government, they need to pass legislation and enforce it, which so often doesn't happen. And then corporations, they just get away with murder. How does that happen? I realize that you've got the lobbyists and so on and so forth. And there's a lot of money that's involved, but everybody has a role, and everybody has to play their role to the best of their ability.
Okay, so those are all the questions that we have for you all today. We're now going to transition into the Q&A. So if any of our participants have any questions that they'd like to pose to the panelists, just drop it in the Q&A box.
And for now, we're going to get started because we have quite a few questions in there. So the first question that I thought was interesting was Farzad said, given that politics often overrides the science in policymaking, I'm glad that Jamie shared the idea that storytelling and art are key ways to get more scientists into policy issues. Do you each have a favorite example of this, of a story to incorporate science and policy together and activism?
Well, it hasn't been recent, but whenever I think about policy making, climate change, I think of Ursula Rykova. And she actually is from Papua New Guinea, Genia. And they are actually the first climate refugees. And they've been forced off of their island and have had to move, to a nearby island where wars are breaking out and they're not really welcome. The other issue with that, she came to the UN here in New York City to let them know what was going on, and she got no help. They only needed something like $100,000 just to move the entire population from one island to the next, but they didn't want to get involved because of politics. And see, to me, that's a shame, because we're talking about, people's lives. We're talking about the fact that their carbon footprint is so low, but yet and still, the rest of the world is actually responsible from them losing their homeland. So, I think people have to find it within their hearts. When situations like this come up, you got to put politics aside, and do the right thing. That just seems to be very hard for us to do. But we've got to take care of each other. This is the only planet we have. Where are we going?
In terms of stories, definitely following on what Gerceida was saying, is making these approaches to engaging the public and to reaching out and storytelling, making them relatable. One of the issues that the scientific community suffers from, and academia in general suffers from, it's seen as removed and not what the real world is about and unrelatable. I'm sure all of you have heard about the book, Don't Be Such a Scientist. What has been very effective that I've seen in terms of a story, it's actually a story about a story, using community dramas to have discussions. The reality as well is that we live in times when the word science, the word climate change, all of these issues are heavily politicized. Somebody hears these terms, activism and advocacy, and they start to think of some crazy mob with picket fences coming and invading. It's in general, it can be very negative leaning, I should say. So the story that I want to share is the idea of using community dramas. There is an organization actually right here in New York called PCI Media, they are called. And their approach is to tell stories through drama and entertainment. And it's very effective and is a tool that has really worked because it disarms people. Yes, we're talking about HIV and the stigmatization of people who are not perceived as straight. Yes, we're talking about sanitation in a community and what happens to your bathwater. And yes, we're talking about some other difficult topic, but it's introduced in a way in which people can laugh at themselves. It disarms the discussion and the topic, but also addresses some very serious, pertinent, important facts and realities as well. I think that's one thing that I've kind of seen and observed that has been very, very effective.
Yeah, I'm going to tell a story that it involves all of us because it actually is maybe my favorite story, which is the story of how here in liberal studies, we developed this sustainability, health, and the environment concentration. And that story, it really makes me happy because it highlights the role of individuals. We didn't have this concentration in global liberal studies until 2 years ago. And it came together so quickly just by people walking by each other in the hallway, saying something, and then somebody said something to somebody else, and then it was in a meeting. And then there was so much support from within liberal studies across the faculty and the students and the administration. And then, this wonderful group of people and Leah and Gerceida, all of you are part of that. It just feels really good to me. It's still a very small group, and I really appreciate the pioneering students. We have 7 juniors, and then we have 6 or 7 sophomores, and we're just enjoying now where everybody has an important role to play. And I also think it's important because it isn't focused on science, right? It's a global liberal studies major where we're encouraging humanities, arts, any kind of can study food, agriculture, sustainable fashion, water security, climate change, biodiversity, all of those things through many different lenses with global perspectives. And I just have a lot of appreciation for that having come into existence and for being a part of that.
Thank you all so much. And unfortunately, we're reaching the top of the hour. So I think we're going to have to end here. But I just want to thank all the panelists again. Thank you for taking time out of the day to be here. And thank you to everyone who attended. Have a great weekend.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.